So it's just a matter of fact that our rules are kind of whack, thanks to James' workshop. So today we will have a wish list for the upcoming Dataslate changes, hopefully, and we'll do an overall faction discussion as I have topics we're going to go into today. So wish list faction to have current state of orcs that I want to just overall summary, just in case you haven't been peeking or paying attention to what the numbers say. Changes we'd like to see within those detachments. So I'm going to go through each detachment through some points out there because unlike maybe other orc content creators you've seen or people who discuss orcs, who I also beloved to us, I play every single orc detachment intentionally for the channel. So we're going to talk about every orc detachment and how I think they can be tweaked and changed and improved. I also want to talk about unit point changes. So mind you, as I talk about what will be after that will be datasheet changes that I'd like to see. It doesn't mean that I'm asking for both necessarily on this. So if I make point increases, it might, or decreases that sound outrageous, it might be because there's not datasheet changes. But if I want good datasheet changes, maybe the point could stay the same. So that's subject to your opinion also as well. So be sure to let me know with these. And then I also want to do a unit focus where I'm going to use Squig Hog Boys and mounted characters and their adjacent as exact examples of why I think orcs have kind of a lack of understanding and identity as to what we are and what we used to be, and how GW kind of has made us suffer from that, and the community still perceives us in those ways, and for a matter of fact, honestly. And then to end it all off with, we're going to have a quick, does GW understand orcs anymore? Now, I don't think they hate us as much people do like to think and say. We'll see in the chat because, of course, this is live. Shout out to live, so we'll be going through that a lot at the end of the video as well. So give me your thoughts. But I'm actually going to have this whole presentation, brief one, of course. It's not about hating or bragging or nagging on GW, any of those things. It's actually just a question which the community can actually get involved in. Do you think GW understands orcs anymore? So we'll get into that. But of course, we also have to get into today's sponsor, the Baron of Dice. So shout out to Baron of Dice as they make high quality custom dice. So check them out in the description for 5% off because nobody likes taxes. And check out the Waaagh Tactics dice as they help us go a long way. And of course, do the paint competition if you them get, and you'll win some of those dice. So on screen, you can see some of the past winners. Right now, we have the cans competition. So shout out to those gets. And of course, shout out to our new sponsor, our new sponsor, Adept Roll. So Adept Roll comes with Math Hammer app for iOS and Android. We start with easy importing of units. So you can import your units, the enemy units, whether it's your local crusades, your local friend groups, people you might think, or units you might see in tournaments that you've never actually gone into. You can actually choose modifiers that you wish to see. It'll keep those profiles so that you can continuously go back to it. So instead of sitting there and looking at your your rolling dice app that you have at home, and you're sitting there constantly doing the re-rolls, and you're like, well, friend, when I rolled it my 17 times on the toilet, sorry, that's not even proper Math Hammer, okay? This dice goes through hundreds to thousands of actual rolls quickly and efficiently, and gives you a math chart, how to actually outroll, the amount of units you'll kill, the damage you'll actually take. So shout out to Adept Roll. Now let's do a state of the war. So real quick, I just want to go over what the actually hard numbers say now that we're getting into it. And shout out to the chat. And the app is called Adept Roll. All right. ADEPT Roll. All right. So state of the war. We're going to do just what the win rates are as they are. And then also talk about the actual player representation that those detachments have when we actually went through these win rates. Of course, like I said, I played all these, so I have my personal opinions and preferences, as we all do. Now, what I want to start with is Tactical Brigade. Now, Tactical Brigade is sitting at a handy-dandy 58% win rate, but as you can see, we have a 6% player base, very small, as well as the actual representation of them winning events, so getting first place or even going X and 1, is actually less than what we've seen from Dreadmob and Warhorde, or just right around tied with Dreadmob, as they had a spike more recently, right? So they really weren't even performing that best at X and 1. A lot of the time, people were actually getting knocked out of being at the top placings because of how elite Tactical Brigade ended up being and how restrictive it is. So if you're familiar with it, your high-level player, they know how to deal with it. Draw your assets, put something like an Onager Doomcrawler, something stupid, good enough toughness and invuln. You might not kill it, and then they draw your assets and you reply and get sniped out. They can pick that Tactical Brigade apart. So it really hurt from the changes to its orders and the actual increases we've been seeing, even though Met Captain is still awesome. Then we have Dreadmob, which Dreadmob is at a 43% win rate. So I would say that's kind of consistent where it's been since the actual Codex release, funny enough. But the player base has actually increased somewhat to 15% of all players are Dreadmob players, and they had multiple X and 1 representations. Now, I will say those were actually Stompas, surprisingly enough. So it's actually not a balanced detachment. Even though I love it and I have a preference for it in some ways, it's really fallen off and lost its identity. But something that's been consistent is Warhorde. So Warhorde is sitting at a 42% win rate, still quite bad, below the GW acceptable win rate threshold. And this is where the majority of the Ork players currently are. They're sitting at a 53% win rate. Player base, excuse me. They're sitting at 53% player base. So that's definitely the majority of the players, obviously beyond 53%. And that's what people are just most likely to see, most familiar with. Now, of course, that could be because it's our, not only our index, but it's our entry-level detachment, as in if you are a new player getting into Orks, whatever it may be, you're most likely just going to play Warhorde, as it's the all-rounder detachment. It's also awesome into combat armies, very specifically, gives a variety of units, actual melee increases, and has a diverse stratagem bank vault. So it's actually awesome detachment, but even it has fallen off due to the just really potent bullied factions that are in the future coming up that exist. So Death Guard, Knights can actually go either way. Warhorde can break the backs of Knights, but a lot of average Ork players really can't actually give that delivering blow, because it is quite nuanced compared to the Knight player just pre-measuring you and saying, I'm not going to let you kill more than 2 Knights on my turn, and then I'm going to have 3 left to table you, right? It's much easier for them than it is for us, even though it can be done. So it's still very hard for the modern, moderate Ork player, especially if you're just running what you got with Warhorde. Then we go to the Hunt, which I'm going to specifically point out. If this meta is vehicle heavy, elite, and unit heavy, you would think something that's called the Hunt, where they pick something specific, destroy it, and actually have this handy dandy ambushing, tactical maneuvering, mobility, picking up units attachment that I think GW was trying to identify with its restricted keywords. Still, it's a horrible win rate with 39% with only a 5% player base, because why are you going to play the Hunt when you can play Warhorde? Then we go to Green Tide. Now, that is definitely taken a huge fall from what it was when Codex released. Green Tide has fallen to a 37% win rate. Not only that, only 3% of players are Horde players. What the heck? We are known as the Green Tide and Lord, the most basic meat and potato unit, like I talk about Ork boy mobs. Just what we talk about in lore, whether we're the punching bag of an army or with the actual focus of the book. We still got mobs, we still got boys, we still got hordes that we're known for. The daunting number of models and armies and wall models. Orks we bring to a wall. Sorry, I was crossing the lore and actually on the table, because really that's how I see the Green Tide. It's how I started 40K. I started, guys, no joke, with boxes of boys, so 90 boys that were just, I got off eBay and some other leftover friends, and then an old Gaz model. That is how I started in a Grot unit. That's how I started 40K. So I take this very personal. I feel like we have a giant chunk of our identity taken out. Other hordes do exist, so it's not that it's just a meta is potent against hordes, even though it is. It's that we lost a lot of our tools and keep taking punishments on our horde. So definitely don't like to see that. Then we have more DACA with a 35% win rate, only 5% player base. Somehow people still make it work, and that's mostly because the detachment isn't actually that restrictive. That's what kind of people always look over when they think of the detachment, and it has some handy stratagems. So more DACA could get just some minor tweak. Well, I wouldn't say minor. They would be quite fundamental tweaks, but it wouldn't be numerous to actually make this detachment work. So I have hopes for it, to be honest, as we go through this. Because remember, all these presentations I'm going to get, I'm giving an argument for. It's not just, I'm mad. So then we go to Cult of Speed with a 35% win rate, even though it did get the focus of GW's love, quote unquote, last data slate. And I like the changes it was given. Obviously, there's just fundamental issues with the buggies, and you can't just fix it with points. Just making them, especially because how big of bases they are. You know, I swear, when I play with a exclusive Cult of Speed army, I fill my entire deployment zone with not just with search and destroy either. So Cult of Speed needs some real fundamental changes, and we'll talk about that as we go through the detachments. And then Bully Boys with what would be the lowest win rate out of every Ork detachment with a 5% player base. So Bully Boys, not only is it super restrictive and had its knees taken out from underneath it, but as the meta evolved due to its restrictive nature, it cannot evolve with it. Now, what I will say is we've shown that they can have still performances, but these are from exceptional players. When I say exceptional, I also mean the exception, as though obviously throughout all of Ork players, there's only a handful of people that make it work because of the pressure and the ability to make contact with units, or they're just playing team events and it's still under the same context. So it's of picking the matchups that they can put pressure on. So Bully Boys really need to get honed in on. And I think as we go through this, each one of these points, we're going to break down why. So we're going to start with the Ork detachments to keep this momentum up. So here I'm going to, for anybody who may be not familiar, an enemy of Orks, or you haven't played every single Ork detachment, or you're new and you're wondering what to look out for and why people are up and downy about it, this part of the conversation is going to be, I'm going to give things that I think would make them somewhat better, that we can look forward to. And if GW didn't want to just be very limited on, we'll just change points, what they could go look forward to with Ork detachments, because I think a lot of these are on the cusp of being solid when you put them in tandem with point changes. So I made sure to mostly avoid just saying decreased cost of unit, right? So let's go through this one by one. We got Duh Hunt. Honestly, I want, for keywords, I know this is one of those restrictive detachments, but I want to see Zod get that keyword. I don't think it'd be quite broken. He is a snagger unit. Even though that's not a huge change, that is a change I think would be easy and kind of nice to see, since they already increased his cost. Now, let's go to some of the points here. We lack damage on non-prey targets. The entire army is focused around, I can pick this one thing and beat it up. And sometimes it can only be killed on the Waaagh to actually make, to actually be able to kill that unit. Or I'm sinking 3-4 CP into this one turn on this one unit to try to get a kill. I'm going to use sustain 5. He's going to be my prey target. I'm going to choose to advance and charge for a CP. And that's for one unit. Then everybody else, if they're not on the wall, can almost do nothing unless there's a kill ring on the list. You end up sometimes taking into a gas or tank busters, for example, to bring in some kind of assets that you really lack, and then they get no benefits from that. Again, you're getting lethal, but then it's only on the critical 5+ is only on the one unit. So if you're playing against the Agents of Vex, for example, keyword, and you're actually closing in the distance, now increasing the cost of these strats. So when I'm pricking critical, even though all these strats are only 1 CP, mind you, they're easily going to add up, and you're still just focusing down one unit. Not to mention, you might try to throw grenades with other units, use tank shock, use the impact mortal strat as well, because since you lack damage, as we're going to the next point, squigs need a buff, and we'll talk about that. As I already said, they have their whole own conversation. But because you lack the ability to do anything damage on that of units on the wall, you also need to do damage outside of the wall. So you'll, with units that aren't the prey target, so you'll try to use a grenade, or you try to use the impact or tank shock, and it just ends up feeling really bad when you're looking at, I only have Snagga boys, and I don't have and I don't have any reliability from my Squig Hog boys. My kill rigs are gigantic. Nothing here is actually that defensively good. And then also, not only do they have oddly written strats, because one of the strats says reroll against the target when your prey target already allows you to reroll. So it's like those are conflated. Why did nobody proofread that? But also like the defensive strats, right? The one defensive strat they have is I can make my guys have cover, and then the Snagga Boys can make stealth. That's a horrible defensive strat as well, in comparison to something like Warhorde, right? There needs to be this distinguishing factor on why I would play this detachment, other than I can drop all this CP into one unit and then hunt down one target, and then everybody else is just a basic Ork data sheet floating around until the Waaagh. It doesn't feel that interesting, dynamic, or good. And the units that are entailed in there are too restrictive. Then we do more DACA. This is a rewrite on the actual detachment rule, in my opinion, right? Now, I know some people will say, well, they just changed it and blah, blah, blah. I understand. And I'm not going to necessarily say it should be always sustained, one, because that might be too contradictory to Warhorde, and two, just linear. But there needs to be some other addition than just assault to these keywords, right? It's like, well, why would I want to just simply assault with something that hits on fives that isn't doing really good with AP? And even though the strats are quite solid for like focusing firing down a unit, ultimately it's not that dynamic, right? The DACA units themselves have gone up. Let's say something like a shoot a boy, for example, doesn't even work in more DACA because it seems like it's too focused on rapid keyword units as well. So you can't really have a variety of units that are going to take the enhancement to give rapid to make those units more interesting. So if they could kind of circumnavigate that and give like boys, the shooter boys, more shots, just be more inclusive on the actual DACA units, not only their cost, but also burners and flamers. So a lot of the time people are just focused on, I just want to do big shots and big damage with like the walkers, which we'll talk about that as well. As walkers are, of course, a factor in this detachment. But if you're going to increase the flamer potentials or burner potentials of units, specifically burner boys, right, that could also make the detachment somewhat more interesting when we talk about rewrites, right? So if GW looks at this detachment and says, well, we changed burner boys, it could also help this detachment, and we change its keyword in its enhancement rule as well. If this is going to be a truly combined arms detachment, which a lot of the times that's what people think it is, in contrary to Dreadmob, as it's not the same. If you really play it out and you use it, you find yourself using Beast Snagga Boy units. In Dreadmob, you never take Beast Snagga Boy units. You hardly ever take boys. You hardly ever take Breaker Boys, for example. In more DACA, you are more prone to bringing diverse combat units. Therefore, if you're going to give assault, there could be another tandem melee multiplier that you're giving to these units as well. So I would really like to see that to be taken into consideration. Maybe like reroll ones to wound on the Waaagh. You know, if orcs don't get any kind of rerolls and others past codexes we have very briefly, sometimes people think it's too much for orcs, but I think giving us something interesting like a reroll of 1 to wound and something could be somewhat interesting, as well as our weapons have good strength and it already hard that we hit. Let's get a reroll on wounds, the ones to wound, right? That would be pretty awesome, and that would also still apply to burners, for example. So it wouldn't be contrary to just burners, and it wouldn't be just I need more sustain, because that might be too contradictory to Dreadmob. Mind you, I'm still saying you keep sustain ones on the Waaagh. I'm just saying it needs something else, because I see it as a combined arms detachment. Then we move to Tactical Brigade. Straight up, I want to revert on the tactics. What are you doing? Now, of course, I'm going to be a little bit extreme, not extreme, but bias here, as Tactical Brigade is obviously one of my favorite detachments. Check out the channel name and how we just like to play as orcs. But in reality, it wasn't too strong. It was at the time very potent, but things were still evolving. You know, that's like picking on the big kid and assuming he's going to be a bully before he becomes a bully just because he's the biggest and so far he's the most athletic. It's like that's what was happening. We were coming out the gates with Tactical Brigade, new codexes starting dropping, and then we got Tank Busters. It was all just a kind of momentum effect. And now you look into the meta, and if you would have left it how it would still be doing, it would at least be doing better, good enough to possibly actually win events, because people would argue, well, it has a good win rate. Well, it has a 3-2 win rate if you're being specific, because it's not making too much X and 1 performances and definitely not winning events, really. I think maybe 1 win event at most, I think, from what I remember. So Tactical Brigades, if you're not going to completely revert the detachment ability, which I would be in preference of, what you could do as well is allow at least the mounted units to get double orders. I think if you're going to buff mounted units like Squig Hog Boys, like we're going to speak about later and such, if you want bikers to be a little bit more interesting, anything like that, allow them to get orders, 2 of them. maybe allow the vehicles, even though they're not good orders, allow them to get 2 orders. And then also, if you can't, because something might be kind of not orky to allow us to take a a leadership check if we fail that. Some people say that's fun and orky because, hey, listen to me, lad. We're both. I want to go get the loot gone, right? That might be a kind of factor for you that you find appealing and narratively friendly and immersive when you're playing. Totally understand that. I think it's funny as well. I laugh about it, and it's just one mortal now. But I think it'd be even cooler if it was something in regards to, your big mechs, don't have to take battle the order shock, or sorry, have to roll for orders on specific units. It could be essentially DACA related units. And then if it's the war boss, if it's boys or whatever knobs, then they don't have to take it on them. And then if you mix the mech up, maybe in that case you would get orders. You could try to restrict it in that current way, or again, make it just mounted don't have to take mortals, because mounted, or maybe leadership 6 units don't have to take mortals. Whatever it is, you could give it slightly increase and buffs to the orders themselves, because that's what everybody really wants to say. Other than that, points might be good enough to just bring Tactical Brigade back, because it just needs a little bit more juice to keep a little bit more momentum going. So Tactical Brigade is the one that I'm actually quite hopeful for, just based off point changes alone, which that's pretty cool. But one that I think needs more than point changes if it's going to make a comeback, unless Predators get completely neutered, would be the Green Tide. So the Green Tide, I want the 5+ invuln at all times back, right? What I mean by that is even, actually in general, I want it to, even if I'm below 10 models, I want to keep my 5+ invuln, right? It used to be that we could actually reroll saving throws of 1. Maybe that's a bit too strong. You don't want to revert that. That's totally fine. Because maybe that was too much durability, but I think that it's fine, and it's time that we just simply, our boys just have the 5+ invuln at all times. That's what I would really like to see for that, if you're not allowing us to also reroll ones, because right now currently it's just a bit too easy to kind of chew through and be too kind of dismantle an Ork boy unit when you get it kind of below that threshold. So other than that, I also think other rules and stratagems could be reverted, such as our surge. Now the fact that there's so much other surges and they're very reliable going on. We had ours, people didn't have them that much. It's like, come on, you can revert that. Ours doesn't have to be a D6 and then we just get to re-roll it. That's cute, but we want some consistency here so we can win games at a higher level, and actually make some tactics. Not, well, I'm re-rolling it. I re-rolled a 1 into a 2 or a 3 into a 1 or whatever, right? You see all these other armies that they're getting. You can take a unit of Zerkers and they have a very reliable, long surge, and you can get them up to a 20-man unit. They're more killy, they're faster, all these different things. So it's like that shouldn't be out of the question for this specific detachment for that stratagem to also exist. But what I would also think that could be looked into, because not all of the restrictions are, of course, getting reverted, is what if you try to find a way to include shooter boys? Now, a funny way would be, let's just make them so cheap that they make up for a little bit of the cost, and you can bring more dudes. Maybe you make 100 and maybe it's 150 points for a shooter boy unit, for example, because right now their data sheet's so lacking. It's like they would need a rewrite. Or you could include Snaggas and allow them to have a 6+ invuln at all times, and maybe they only have access to a couple of the stratagems. They are a battle line. It would be pretty awesome. It'd be a different way to change things up. You could restrict them on enhancements if you're worried about it, or maybe the re-rolling wound in stratagem. But in general, being able to include Snaggas into Green Tide would greatly increase the detachment itself. Then we go to the Bully Boys. So the Bully Boys, just straight up like we said, too restrictive. What I mean by that is, of course, you can do the knobs and mega knobs and war boss units, get the second Waaagh. When I say knobs, I include mega knobs in that. But then when it gets to the stratagems, it's just knobs and mega knobs. That is not only boring, and it's not only the stratagems are not that powerful, but it just feels extremely restrictive to, I have to bring these units to be able to use my strats. That's silly, of course. So when we look at what's going on here, we'd like to see the knob keyword be add to possibly Breaker Boys. And then the flash gits. I think flash gits are obviously knobs. You're just messing around. Now, Hopefully this doesn't all make them have to take an increase in points as well. I don't think that would, because a lot of the time you're obviously not going to advance your flash gets to be able to run up and charge as well. It's just for the fact that you get the invuln kind of built in that, and maybe you can run up and fight some kind of screens in that early Pershing Waaagh and skirmish matchup. But I don't think that necessarily would entail a points increase on that. So Breaker Boys gets, those are two of the biggest things that people have really wanted to see, and I currently agree with that. Now, keep in mind, this is live chat. I will read at the end and go through these, because there's, of course, some of you guys are having great ideas, and thank you for the actual the super chats. Now, we'll keep this up because we got good momentum. So thank you guys for that. Whoa! Now we move to also, the fact is the stratagems for Bully Boys. Now, for the Bully Boys, the stratagems need to be a little bit more dynamic. As for like when there's our only ability to throttle damage is re-rolling hits. Now, if that also includes war boss units, that could be quite outrageous. So I'm not necessarily saying you could always do that, but in reality, if you look at the rest of our strats, like we have Armor of Contempt, our version, it's only in shooting. Could you make it in melee also? And not really just make it so restrictive that it has to only be interesting to shooting, because then it just restricts what units it could be interested on. Or you could include that on units that have a war boss keyword, for example, or that have a mech keyword, for example, something so that it's less restrictive, but you can still have Bully Boys and tail, right? Because Bully Boys shouldn't just be that I can only bring 2 data sheets and then everybody else just kind of floats around. Then we have cost and damage of the key units. So something like Mega Knobs, as I think, could either use point decreases and or rewrite, which we'll talk about that next. But we would like to see either the cost of units that bring damage go down, or the units themselves that are forced to be on the list, such as knobs or mega knobs, have more reliable damage in this detachment. So it could be also that entail that all the knob unit, mega knobs and knob unit keywords innately get +1 weapon skill, right? Instead of +1 to hit, since they already get +1 to hit. This will help offset all of the -1 to hit units that exist in the game. The fact that they're really restricted to only being in combat, since they really don't bring any DACA for the most part. So that would allow those units to still be a big deal. And then, of course, Mega Knobs with the kill saws should be damage 3, in my opinion. But we'll talk about that with the changes in the future, because we're still got to go over actual data sheets that I want to talk about, guys, because this is just we're like halfway through this talk. So we have Cult of Speed. Now I put increased damage ? Some would say that it can already entail damage, because you could include units that bring them, like Tank Busters or Breaker Boys or a Gaz or a Brick of Knobs or a Brick of Mega Knobs. Or I understand that, but I'm saying the units that are actually within the detachment or have the keyword to live on its own. And not that I need you to table everybody, but I need to have somewhat more reliable damage from these units, because they are so casino, dice random with them, right? They're so outrageous with what results you can get. Sometimes you can just completely obliterate units with your buggies, and sometimes you just do absolutely nothing. So buggies themselves need to glow up. As we spoke about a little bit before, is buggies right now are just so cheap that they actually have a place, but they're on night size bases. So it's quite outrageous when you're filling your actual deployment zone and you're moving them around the field to where it's like, yeah, you're so big, but what the heck? So what we would like to see is like a speed Waaagh. So maybe on the Waaagh, instead of just, hey, I'm going to bring some Breaker Boys, and those Breaker Boys or Zod or Knobs are going to be the entire full point of my Waaagh. And then when the Waaagh comes, I'm only going to care about them. Well, I'd like if my speed Waaagh, my Cult of Speed, actually had a purpose. So it used to be that we actually had a secondary Waaagh that was called the speed Waaagh. Now, if you made it to, well, the Waaagh does this for Cult of Speed units, it could be a multitude of things. It could be that, one, you make them all +1 to hit and +1 AP in combat, because so many people are scared of their actual shooting potential. Now, that doesn't make everything better, but there is a land stratagem in the detachment as well. So that could be more interesting if you need to finish something off after your random damage or your mortal wound potential. There could be that you just get additional AP during the Waaagh with shooting. Now, we've had that before, and it did scare people, so we don't know if we'll go back to that, for example, right? It could be that you increase our movement again +2 because our buggies are already big bases. You got to pay for pivot all the time. So make up for a little bit of the restricted movement on that. The bikers are paying for an inch, buggies are paying for 2. The trike is gigantic. Give them a little bit of a movement increase on that as well, since we already have the fallback and charge and such, and maybe a little bit of an increase to our enhancements, as a lot of the time the enhancements in this detachment are quite underwhelming, and so a lot of the time people just don't care to bring them at all. And we would like to see, in my opinion, one that helps increase the efficacy either defensively or offensively. So maybe it just always has a 4-up invuln, or whenever it gets shot, it automatically gets to make a move. For example, like a biker unit, there could or pop smoke, so they can be -1 to hit at all times, and always have cover, and you can add some kind of defensive mechanics from these enhancements to just build up on the fact that I would like this unit to actually survive, to fall back and shoot and charge again. So maybe not -1 to hit like stealth example, maybe just -1 to hit at all times. That way it works in combat too. So there's ways that you could make the enhancement a little bit more appealing in Cult of Speed, in my opinion. Then we go to Dread Mob, which, of course, when I see my stuff from Facebook, shout out to Facebook, a lot of people are like, hey, that guy seems to really like Dread Mob. I do. I like all the detachments, though, because I play them all. But I think Dread Mob is one of those that was slept on early. And so a lot of people just didn't understand it. And it has its competitive nature and its silly nature. And so do I. That's why this channel exists. So I identify a lot with Dread Mobs. Oh, speaking of Dread Mob, there's no dreads in your mob, right? So when we look at the actual Dread Mob list, you don't see Death Dreads. You hardly see Titanic Walkers sometimes. And if you do, it's either in like a weird skew, like people on TTS will run 3 and 3 of both kinds of knots, or you'll see Stampas and knots, or you'll see just one Titanic Walker on the list. From those few people who are actually doing well with them is notable, because most of the people are just getting them shot off the table and upset with their actual performance, because the Titanic Walkers, though they do have, so the Walkers do have strats like reroll the entire hit roll, for example, and then there's an actual strat to make -1 to hit. I'm maybe not on the Stampa if people are so worried about it, but I'm under the opinion that Titanic knots could take the -1 to hit stratagem and should be able to use it as well. That's just me. Maybe it's a little bit too outrageous, but of course I'm saying not in also point decreases, but I'm saying we could focus on making their stratagems be a little bit more interesting in that way. We could also focus on the detachment being a little bit less punishing to walkers to some degree. It could be like cap out the amount of hazardous checks they have to take, as in maybe they only have to take it on 3 weapons, for example. So the Stampa is always going to use its 3 weapons, but it never uses its other weapons competitively, because I'm just taking blast checks and going to blow myself up. So if it could restrict that on, okay, if I bring 4 custom mega blasters, of course I still have to take hazardous. A lot of times I'm using strats, but let's limit it to just 3. So that, of course, I still have a chance to blow myself up, but it's not like a 33% chance to blow myself up now, right? Because if I'm taking 4 on 2 ups, that's increasing the chances a lot of just getting 1 shot. So it's like, could we limit it? Of course, it'll still let me, I guess, take on 1s and 2s, because the strats can be quite outrageous. But for certain walkers specifically, I'm speaking of, could that detachment rule be less damaging in that way? That way he's not just murdering themselves, because they're already quite soft. And that's why I'm in favor of the strat that reduces damage by 1, because a lot of the time I'm taking some damage, so I like to reduce some damage on the upcoming as well, because I pretty much already hurt myself, and even the reducing damage won't offset the amount I've taken to myself usually late game. There's times where my knots has been able to do so much work for like 2 turns against, we'll say, demons specifically, right? But then they just blow themselves up because I started shooting all their guns. It's just, okay, that's lame. So I'd like to be able to use all my doc on all of my abilities. Then we go to the detachment rule less punishing, and then just in general, I want the Titanic Walker glow up. So of course, even though I'm going to talk about detachment themselves, this is just to all our Titanic Walkers. I want to be able to move through terrain. So many other detachments can do it, and armies can do it. I'm not, even if they're not doing it for every detachment, because they're too worried and scared about that, at least for Dreadmob, because it's already a quite slow detachment, and then it has a strat to advance and shoot. And that would be awesome for those Titanic Walkers to be staged behind the terrain and then advance and shoot through that. You get to reroll the advance, so you can actually clear that terrain piece. So that'd be quite interesting if they were actually able to bring that up and take that into consideration, as that's a big issue that we don't like. So because I don't want to just bring up points in this, even though we're going to talk about points next. Those are some of the nuance to all these detachments I want to bring up. And then Warhorde itself, I think Warhorde is just suffering from a lot of its predators and point increases, and some just our lack of damage into these units. So all in all, the funny thing I really want to say that I have still feel in my heart is revert the monster restriction to hard as nails. All right? That's all I want, GW. Let my gargantuan squiggoth be -1 to wound. Just do it. You had the right idea in Index Hammer, right? I wouldn't be making this video asking if you guys understood orcs if you didn't do something like that. All right? You didn't. What was that? You changed mods to not be monster, and then you're like, I know you guys got that Forge World guy left, that Dusty. I know you paid 500 USD for that thing, but I don't want you to play it. You take that, right? What was that? Get out of here. So let's move to point changes we'd like to see. Now, not every single, it does look like I got a bunch of things up here because I do, but it's not every single unit in the Ork army. And of course, this is a consideration too. Well, if they didn't change the detachment, the datasheet rules, which, so the next presentation, the talk after this will be the part of this conversation after this points will be the changes I'd actually like to see on the data sheets themselves to some of these units. So keep in mind, I'm not saying that all of these units need the changes, the data sheet changes and the point changes, but some of them actually do. So yeah, let's talk about these point changes. So let me know what you guys think about them as well, because some of these are contentious, some of these maybe I got a little bit greedy, and some of these are just no-brainers. So let's start with someone I currently hate on a lot, the Beast Boss on Squigosaur. This dude at minimum needs to come down 10, if not 15 points. He has a lame datasheet ability and he does lame damage. We're going to talk about him specifically on his own alongside the Squigs, so we're not going to go on that too long, but he needs to at least go down 10 to 15. Then we go to the Big Mech and Mega Armor. Mind you, I do think Mega Knobs need to come down too, but Big Mech and Mega Armor can simply come down 5, maybe even 10. I need a distinction between him and the War Boss and Mega Armor that's a little bit more clear. Because you don't want just someone who stands there and gets shot when so many armies are just melee focused anyways, and he becomes kind of, boring and useless. Mega Knobs don't really shoot that well, so even though I know that the stratagem for shooting, you can reroll the whole hit roll, so that could be kind of cool with him. It's really not that interesting. He needs a little bit more of a distinguishing factor, come a little bit down in points, just like Mega Knobs themselves, so maybe you could fit another Gra on the Unit Army, whatever it may be, but Bully Boys obviously need help. And then, of course, even though Tactical Brigade is doing all right, they'll take a benefit from this. I think they could use a little bit of a benefit because, as we spoke about, Tactical Brigade needs a points decrease, right? They're already performing well. Give the Big Mac, pull back the Big Mac and Mega Armor just a little bit. That's what's also making him suffer. And then maybe he might even become interesting in Dreadmob down the road. Who knows? Then we move to Boss Snickrot. So I actually have some other opinions about him as well, but from his current state where he's at, and mind you, I am biased. I am not a Snickrot lover, nor am I a hater of Snickrot. I love mine. He's painted beautifully. But currently, I think he's just cost too much. He just kind of kept going up in points. He wasn't really getting spammed on any lists from that were performing well or highly well. He does not too much uniqueness other than the fact that he can just pick himself up whenever he wants in the movement phase. The fact that it's whenever it wants is the most useless factor about him. So I have more things I would say about him that we'll talk about with the data sheets that I'd like to see change. But in his current state, I need him to come down in points. He's just far too expensive. Commandos themselves are obviously quite expensive. And when you have him 95 and Mando's 120, it's, even though they have different jobs, I check out the videos I did on that, I know they have different jobs. But the fact that they're both the only two infiltrators and you're not sticking him with that unit anyways, he's obviously performing his own distinct role and task. And that across also all of 40K for other people who have access to that tool, this wouldn't be too much of a point cost, right? For especially for how soft he is. Then we move to Gazgul Thraka. So I'm actually under the opinion that Gaz, alongside the Mega Knobs, like I said before, can come down 10 points. As I said, I think even Warhorde itself, the detachments that are going to bring Gaz, which are typically just Warhorde, maybe a Da Hunt, maybe the Bully Boys, like I said, they could all use just a little bit more things. And I think Gaz at 235, just 225 would just feel better. We definitely would. I don't think that's asking too much, especially if they don't give us all, obviously not going to give us all these changes we want, and they're not going to focus on just we don't know how much all of our problematic predators are going to be going, but right now Gaz himself doesn't even do the job of like being a good hard counter to knights or a good hard counter to Death Guard necessarily, so he's not even performing his task in that way. So Gaz would need to come down because he is only T6. He's still quite squishy in a certain way, and the 4-up Feel No Pain felt like it went a long way. So I do like Gaz a lot. Trust me, I make videos. I've liked Gaz all the time, but I think he does need to come down. Then we go to Mazrog, who definitely needs to come down, boys. Man, Mazrog has changed since Index Hammer. Oh, well, used to be. So we'll talk about more about that with the actual Squig one because, boy, you haven't heard me rant before because I don't really rant like negativity ever on the channel. I don't think ever I have. But in this case, when I talk about Squigs, I'm a little unhappy about this. So we're going to talk about the Pain Boss. So Pain Boss needs to come down another 10 points. So he was already, I think, 60 points flat. You could argue, he can maybe come down even a little less, more, like 15. But I'm going to say 10 because 180 for the Beast Boss, 20 point like the distinction still isn't even that appealing for how damaging the Beast Boss is. The only reason at all I kind of consider a Beast Boss is because in the hunt, if you can get him and mobs of if you can get Squigs on the field and then mobs of Snaggas on the field alongside a couple of the Snagaboy units with the Beast Boss, that big brick of 20 Snagaboys with the Pain Boss can actually go a long way, specifically into hunt when it can fall back and continue to charge or just charge outside of the wall and stuff like that, for example. So and he's still a part of easy kit that people have a lot of them, so I'd like him to actually have some playability, and sometimes there is just that little bit of points you need extra, so he would need to come down to be a good gap, like 20-25 point decrease between him and the Beast Boss to slide away into a list, most likely even then only on a hunt list. Then we go to a Pain Boy. So the Pain Boy, he's 3 wounds, dudes. He's 3 wounds. Chill out, GW. Chill out. All right. I know you're scared of Green Tide and Ork mobs because we're the best and green is best. We're winning the whole 40K universe in the far-fetched future where there's only war. Orks are the only ones having fun. Hey, that's because the Pain Boy, right? We know that. So GW focused on him. Expel spreadsheet made him and the Pain Boss go up in points. Pain Boy needs to come down just a little bit to kind of revive Green Tide a little bit. And to give kind of like the versatility aspect to maybe I can stick in something outside of a boy unit, because right now he's just too much. I would even argue for 10 points, but I personally know how good the meat and potatoes of the Ork Codex is, of the boys mobs themselves. So though I'm going to advocate for boy mobs going down in points, boy mobs themselves need to come down that 10 points. They need to get reverted back to 160 points. That 170 increase was specifically for more DACA when they got double Waaagh. That was a doubling down on more DACA, nerf. So honestly, that just needs to get reverted. Just straight up flip boys back to 160. To me, that's almost like a no-brainer. GW just kind of dropped the ball there. And then we have the Weird Boy. So the Weird Boy also, he was taking increases because people started to bring him on Green Tide lists, and then he could reliably jump into your backfield and also do secret missions, but then also he could get reliable charges off on you that would really mess with opponents, like +2 to it. I forgot what it was, like specifically. Oh, depending on the round it was, he got +1 to his charge based off the Green Tide detachment. So he took increases from that as well because he had that right diversity. But right now, I'd like to see him go down in points to act as like maybe you can run him solo, you can run him with Breaker Boys. It would give him the diversity of like, okay, for 60 points, maybe I can throw him somewhere else. Then we go to the Word Boy. Word Boy just needs a respawn. No amount of points will fix this guy. He sucks. Let's go down. So let's actually go to the walkers. So let's go to the walkers. So there's an argument that all the walkers need to an extent some sort of help. So we're and this can even be argued, like I said, in the next part of this conversation. So as of now, looking at them as for what they are, I need Def Dread down 15 more points. Right? Might sound outrageous to some of you kids. I know last edition was 95 points. I'm not going down that far, but let's be honest. So many factions can just simply say, I'm going to choose my Melta. I'm going to do a Miracle Dice example. Aldar, Sisters, for example, armies that can get reliable outcomes on something like a Def Dread for its low toughness. Whether it's +1 to wound, a lance, whatever it may be, 8 wounds on what he's trying to do. He's not good at shooting, not reliable for shooting. He needs to be act more like a distraction card effects. So if you're not, this also includes if they don't really adjust the detachments themselves to be more inclusive or beneficial to a Def Dread. Like I said, maybe in more DACA, if the flamers go up to like strength 6, that are the scorchers go up to strength 6 on a Def Dread, right? Then maybe, he won't need such a decrease, in my opinion. And maybe if his data sheet ability was at an additional -1 for the check, or if it was an aura of -1 OC if you're near him, like if he had more of a benefit to an army like a Hellbrute, right? Then you could argue his points, but currently where he's at, where I'm just throwing him out there for unreliable outcomes, because even when he has all his claws, hitting on a 3+ can just totally whiff. It's not even that beneficial. Giving the +1 of a mech only happens at the end of a movement, so you can't even give him +1 to mech without leaving the mech fully exposed from combat, for combat example. So the claws, he's not going to be able to do it. In shooting, he's really unreliable, obviously hitting on orc ballistic skill. So he needs to come down very soft. And even with the -1 hit, people are usually so reliable to hitting him with D6 type weapons or D6 +1 type weapons. They're all over the game. They're all quite reliable, not just because of the meta, but at all times. It's like Def Dread just needs to be so cheap that I can get into trade warfares with him or go after like transports and stuff like that, and not feel as bad when it whiffs. Because that's really just the only things that he can even somewhat hunt are like small T9 95 point 105 point vehicles in themselves, and so that's where he kind of belongs in that field, where he can only really hang with those kind of units. And even like T6 units can kind of sometimes elite infantry kind of like 105 point units can even punch him out, and they're just fast staging small 3-man units, for example. So or like we said, just there's so many ways that are easy just to reliably get him off the table for easy trades. So he's not even at a point cost that he's a good trade. Then we go to the Stampa. So for the Stampa, I am not one of the crazy gets that would say 650 or whatever, but I am going to say minus another 100. That's because you're always paying for the mech tax. So in reality, the package is currently 845. That'd be 745. So you wouldn't be able to bring in the Kyre other Stampa for the other gets, for the crazy other gets that want to bring another Stampa to the list, because that's what GW wants to avoid, 3 Stampa cycles like you guys out there. And of course, maybe once they can move through terrain, maybe that's even too much 100 points. But as of now, they need to come down 100 points just so you can fit more assets on the field. That way, once they do die, you can still play with this unit. It does have some viability. It's not just a joke. Stampa actually goes hard. So let's get a Stampa down some 100 points, even though GW never has since 8th edition. Then we go to Gork and Mork. I think we need, minus 15 points. We need Gorkanaut, like, what is he, 165, 265 right now, 250. Sorry, that's the Gorkanaut. And then the Morkanaut is, 285. So anyone down to 270. Those point costs feel better because they are so unreliable, right? They're so unreliable for what they're trying to do. Low AP, easily killing themselves, low defensive capabilities, don't have a 2-up armor save, can't rotate ion shields necessarily, very slow, oval, awkward bases. The fact that they're just so slow is also just a deficiency. Now, I appreciate their transport capacity, don't get me wrong, but the fact that they're so slow just means that they can't really stage, and when they do stage, they don't get involved in the game sometimes, on top of the fact that they can't move. So it's like, man, these guys need to come down just to bring more assets on the field as well. In my opinion, Gorks and Morks, they're so reliant on the wall, even for their data sheet abilities. It's so silly. And we'll talk about that more with like GW understanding Orks. It's like Gork and Morks are just, I don't hate them. Of course, I like Dread Mob Lover, but at the same time, they're just kind of underwhelming. You know, it's like, yeah, I hope my guy can beat up an Arbinger. You know, it's like whatever. So then we move to a Killer Can. So another unit that kind of just doesn't really function that well at all on like WTC terrain, for example, is Killer Cans. Dudes move 6 inches, can't move at all, giant bases, can't take a leader to get any kind of ability, only have reliability and like Dread Mob and maybe more DACA under certain occasions. So Killer Cans just need some, they cost too much for what they are. They really should just be for soaking damage. So if they could go down in points on that, so they'd be a little better at soaking damage for their cost as they close the distance on the big breaks, that could be a little bit more appealing. But Killer Cans are one of those units that need like a data sheet help. Their data sheet actual ability is outrageously silly. Then we go to other data sheets that we're going to talk about. Just to sum up these real quickly, we got Breaker Boys. Now, the reason I picked Breaker Boys is one, I already kind of did think they were a little overcosted for 140. They're very reliant on the Waaagh, and they're quite reliant on the War Boss a lot of the time, though they can do work on the Waaagh without the War Boss. Without a War Boss or a Waaagh, they do nothing, just relatively nothing to anything, right? So they can go down, but even if that's not a good enough position for you, the current state of Bomb Squigs themselves are an argument for Breaker Boys to go down, because I can't even use my Breaker Boys, right? If I if I get out and the Waaagh in advance, I can't throw it. And if I get out to stage to stand behind a terrain piece and you're still behind your terrain piece, I can't throw it, and I can't even see you because I'm in the terrain piece, so I have no visual aid. And it's now on a 3+ instead of a 2+. So just the mortal wound potential of this unit altogether has completely almost disappeared, vanquished, or taken a great diminished position on it, or ability to use it. So it needs a diminishing points. It needs to come down at least 5 points, in my opinion, because it's bad. Bad because the bomb squigs. That's my perm position. If you don't take the War Boss example and such, and the Waaagh needing the Waaagh, right? They're very reliant on the Waaagh position. Then just the bomb squig not existing is a pretty decent position. So then we have the kill rig. So the kill rig, funny enough, I do think it needs to come down in points, because I think all in tandem, Squig Hog Boys and the kill rig, and Beast Pain Boss, and like I've said, some of these units all need to come down in points just to fit more stuff on the hunt. But I'm not trying to bring Kill Rig down so much that he can be spammed in like something like Bully Boys or War Horde, right? But at the same time, both of those detachments need a little bit more stuff. So if you can opt to Kill Rigs, which, as we've seen, as the metas, the whole 40K universe has become more killy in 10th edition, the kill rigs being just T10 and 3-up armor save, they're just kind of quite easy to kill, and they're so huge, they're always easy to get position on. So I think they can go down a little bit more down in points. Then we go to the Commandos. So right off the bat, you can argue for 5 points, because 5 of those points might even be for the bomb squig. Now, they only get 1, and honestly, you're usually in a better position, so you can use your bomb squig a little bit more. Still unreliable. And the unit themselves still cost too much. I would take a -10 on them, just because it's like, if I'm trying to box you out and I'm taking a horrible trade of 120 points, for essentially a couple 10 Ork Boy bodies, right? The Ork Boy unit costs 80 points. These guys cost 120. 40 points, 50% increase for just these dudes, because they can infiltrate and get stealth. Of course, they get a couple special weapons and such, so I don't hate them, but I think they do need to come down 10 points for that positioning and playability in games. They're really big. You can't split them up into smaller squads to get better staging for them. A lot of the time, they're the like easiest unit for the enemy to hunt and target down, and a lot of the times, I think that's a problem for Ork players, is they kind of spoon feed their opponent. So if Mandos are one of those units that they're so big that they get kind of spoon fed sometimes. So if you can't run them at 5s, they need to come down at least 10. Then we go to Ludas, specifically just a 10-man Luda unit. 10-man unit Luda unit needs to come down to 15 points, needs to be reverted back to original cost, just like the Ork Boys need to be reverted back to their original cost. Then we go to the Meganods. This unit has a bit different compositions, right? Which actually I love that. We could talk about that in general, how in all, I think GW should increase or decrease costs on our bigger units or smaller units to kind of get a little bit more accurate values out of them. So Meganods, they do that for. And I think Mega Knobs need to at least come down 5 points. And this is one of the units that I would argue needs to come down 5 points and still needs a little bit more adjustment in his data sheets or in the Bully Boy detachment. So this is one of those units that's like, well, you took a lot away from us from taking the 4 out, Feel No Pain. That's a lot. And you're not going to give that back to us because you just wouldn't. Just because that's just Orks can't have that nice of things. But in general, they can come down in points and actually be able to do some kind of damage. Then we move to the Met guns. So Met guns are always slept on. No one ever talks about them. No one ever complains about them necessarily. But the Met guns are extremely slow. GW reduced their AP. The Smasher guns are only strength 9, so they can't really pull their role and do their thing. So even though when we didn't have Tank Buster boys, I spent at least like 12 games trying to get these mech guns to work as a brick, and like a multitude of matchups, some that they actually wanted to go into, some they didn't, and trying to get them to work, and mech guns just didn't. They cost too much for their unreliability, so they also could use a change to them. But nonetheless, they need a points decrease, because when you're looking at them at 50 points per unit model, it's like, well, what can I even do with this dude that can barely move? Unreliable weapon with the bubble chucka, which itself we could argue needs to be changed, because how it's written is argued that it's per model in the unit a lot of the time. So people will actually, if you take 3 in one unit and you have three bubble chuckas, you might have to roll out every single bubble chucka independently and then get different results for it. So that sucks. It needs to come down pretty bad. If it came down lower in points, you could argue that you bring it in as another small reserve unit. People have used it for scoring, taking up space, holding down lanes, and in general, it just needs to come down as well. Maybe something that can contend with Grots as for another 40-point option that can be on your list. Then we get to the Squig Hog boys, which, like I said, I believe after this, we're gonna, we'll have more to talk about, but Squigs have their own argument to be made in conversation. But I'm gonna come off the rip and say at least 20 points come down, maybe even 30. Squig Hog boys need to come down in points. They're in a horrible position, and then and we'll talk about that on their own talk or during their own conversation. But their Gargantuan Squigoth, though people see it as a meme, I think it needs to come down, because if you're going to take it away from us in next edition, which they might not, let us actually able to play it. The meta is totally fine with destroying it. There's so many things that now exist that are tougher than it. And you're not giving us Artist Nails back or removing the monster keyword restriction on it, which is what I would like you to do. Therefore, he just needs to come down at least 60 points. I at least want a free Burner Boy unit out of his cost, because I'm putting Burner Boys inside of him. Let's do it. So then we move on to units that I specifically want to call out and data sheet changes. Some of them I already mentioned, but we're going to kind of unpack it just a little bit more for the ones that I didn't. The main thing that I just need changed on all the data sheets are all the bomb squigs. I want them all reverted to a 2+, and you can still keep your line of sight, but they also need to work when you advance. All right, you can argue that, hey, maybe they don't work when your tank busters get out of the truck. We're not going to change that. Cool. Allow my breaker boys and my Squig Hog boys, and possibly in my commandos, to advance and utilize the bomb squigs. I'm paying for it. They actually have 2 per unit. You're charging us for both of them, right? You don't see the war gear cost, but when GW does the calculation for our bomb squigs on our breaker boys and our Squig Hog boys, and they give us 2 on the larger unit for the squigs and 2 for the breaker boy unit base, they are charging you points for that, because they charge in a certain amount of mortal wound potential is just an immediate point increase to that your unit. Because you have the capability to do mortal wounds, GW increases your cost per mortal wound that you can do. And in this case, we're at least taking a 5-point increase, maybe even, I would say probably about 5-point increase, like I said earlier, to all of our units, just simply because the bomb squigs that we're not even able to freaking use, right? So it's ridiculous, but you also made them so unreliable on the 3+. When it's my one time to go and put them down, there's a lot of time I'm not even going to be able to use it. Take away my second one. Go ahead from the breaker boy unit. I'll even take that. Take away the second one. And I want it on the 2+, and I want it to advance. What's wrong with you even giving that to, right? That's a whole nother slide. I'm getting ahead of myself, but that's kind of what we're talking about. Is GW, do you even understand what Orks are doing when you change bomb squigs like this? Do you actually understand how that impacts like the just basic gameplay? Like that doesn't, you look silly with that kind of change, to be honest. It's just a silly thing. Like they obviously don't know how to play Orks. Like that's all it takes. It's like, oh, they have no one who plays Orks over there. They don't even know what's going on. They don't even know that they need to advance these melee units. So then we go to Boss Snikra. So I put boss in red keyword because like there's a little bit of an argument for like, can we give him the war boss keyword, bro? Like he can't take enhancements anyway, so it's cool. Like I just want him for bully boys a little bit, right? Can I get that? Like I don't think that's asking too much because the boss is implied in his name. But hey, let's say you don't do it. Let's say you don't need boss Snikra for boss. That's cool. Like I said, I would like an Agents of Vect ability from him. Or him just be a lot more impactful to the commandos if you're going to change his data sheet potential. So he used to have that, like if you were fighting someone that was in a terrain feature that they get +1 to wound against. Well, maybe you could do if you're fighting an enemy unit that's within an enemy deployment zone, you get +1 to wound, right? Or if you fight an enemy unit that's maybe 9 inches away from other enemy units, you get +1 to wound with him included in them, or even on his own. You could argue he gets lone op. You could argue something like that. If he's going to stay at that 95 point premium, he would be someone that needs a point change. Then we go to Mega Knobs. The Mega Knobs need to be 3 damage. You get 2 attacks. 2 attacks per model, guys. They're hitting on 4s. That's outrageous. That's outrageous when you have stuff like Wolfen, even though they're not specifically the same thing. I know that, guys. One has a way better armor save. They have somewhat different roles and abilities because they're army. I know the context. I understand that. But I'm just saying it's not out of the question for this unit to get up to damage 3. At least specifically, I'm speaking of specifically with the twin kill saws. Let's say you don't want to do it for just 1 kill saw because it's too broken. Maybe even just twin kill saws. But in general, Mega Knobs, some unit other than Breaker Boys and Tank Busters, like we talk about too restrictive or too limited, this is one of the things where Mega Knobs are one of those units that can be given a glow up to kind of expand and make a distinguish more of a difference between knobs and Mega Knobs and Breaker Boys, right? It's like, well, you have some durability with the Mega Knobs, but they're only damage 2, just like the knobs. And well, you get 3 damage from the Breaker Boys, but you get some durability from the knobs. It's like, that's not an interesting factor. It should be Mega Knobs both of those should be entailed in that. And that's if at least you're keeping them at the same points cost they're at. Maybe you could leave them at that cost. But currently, that's my opinion, that they need to be 3 damage a lot of the time. GW will not give us back 4 for a Feel No Pain, but I think that'd be also 2. Then we go to Burner Boys. Their data sheet ability sucks, and their burners suck, right? GW did, and so of course it's for Space Marines, so they may, it might be a bias thing from GW, but they did increase the abilities and the killing potential of I'm having a brain fart right now, but those little flamer Marines, you guys tell me chat right now real quick, but the Marines that they came out with against the Tyranids, those new ones from the starting box, they made them more interesting. It wasn't that hard. Burner Boys need to actually not have the range restriction to reroll the wounds, right? It could be that they need +1 to hit, so that you can maybe in combat, so they could be a little bit more better, like more reliable in combat for their multi-phase potential. And Furnace Marines, thank you. There's Burner Boys can just take just a little bit of a buff and make it a little bit more appealing to, do I take a flash kit or a burner, right? Don't increase the cost of flash kits just because they're the only cool SWAT team / skirmish little chaff, Ork boy unit that we want to bring. In general, you can bring a Burner Boy. For 60 points, it'd have a nice distinction, but at its current abilities and data sheet, it can't really even hang with the Scout Squad. Like it could get picked up from a Scout Squad. Like it doesn't even do that. The custom Mega Blaster we pay for is super unreliable. We're paying for that. He's kind of out of character. The rest of the unit wants to shoot flamers. He doesn't. It's like, so giving flamers maybe +1 shot as well on all their flamers because they're low strength and you don't want to do that. There's ways that this could be improved. The Burner Boys, like I said, whether it's detachments like more DACA that make them better, but they themselves need a data sheet to get blown up because their data sheet's so underwhelming. That's why flash kits for 20 points, I'd just rather play them. There's so many times when I'm making a list that I just like completely dismiss burner boys for flashigates, even though I'm like, this would fit really nicely. I'm like, no, I got to find the points. These guys just in game don't do anything I need them to do. They're so unreliable. Doesn't mean I've never had them work, right? Doesn't mean you can't make them work. That's not what I'm saying. Don't get me on that. I'm saying when you're talking about competitively or even mildly competitive like RTT, you'll feel bad if you're even trying to go like on a 3-game streak with them sometimes. Then we go to the Def Dread, like we spoke about with points. These are one of those guys that they're blowing themselves up. They're really squishy and soft, low wound count, unreliable in both phases. Their data sheet ability is underwhelming. You know, Orks lack synergy, which is also fun, right? For 40k armies in general. We don't have synergy across units. Like we had an aura ability from a Def Dread. You know, that'd be cool if it either debuffed enemies or increased our unit's potential just by being near a Def Dread. So if you're going to keep it with the same data sheet ability, then it make it -1, right? Or it could be interesting like that. So all in all, the Def Dread needs an increased, like some diverse change to it. I know that they compare it to the Box Dread. That's why they're scared to put it in points. So this is one of those units that I'm strongly in favor of. Hey, it needs to get a data sheet buff. So whether it's on the Waaagh, or let's say when it charges, if it has all melee hands, it gets +1 to hit. Right? It just, because right now it's like, what? I hit on 3s, but it's just not reliable in that case either. Only -2 AP. No way to give it better, and then pressing the button with Dread Mob. It's like, nah, man. That's not where it's at. So Def Dread needs some love. The Hunter Rig. Hunter Rig's data sheet ability is absolutely abysmal, trash, ridiculously irrelevant. So the Hunter Rig needs a little bit of a mix up there as well. Whether it's maybe it's the one that becomes better at defense. As you see with the Battle Wagon, when it has a hard case or it doesn't, it's higher toughness. Maybe you can make the Hunter Rig have a higher toughness or a better armor save. There has to be some distinguishing factor for the Hunter Rig, so it can maybe that opens up the potential of using 20-man units of Snaggas, which opens up their potential into Hunt. So like people have more access to that when they buy their their combat patrols, they buy their Battle Force boxes. They're playing kind of these more, pushed units and models, allow them to kind of mix it up and have a actual interesting difference between the Hunter Rig and the Kill Rig, because the Kill Rig's so unique and cool right now. But for the Hunter Rig being cheap as dirt, I want more than just a stat line, which is what you're giving us, just like you did with buggies. Then we go to the Killicans. So the Killicans are one of my personal funny favorite units, but their data sheet ability is silly. And it's frustrating, right? So if you didn't know what it does, you roll a d6 on a 1 to 2. I believe you get an additional shot to your weapon. On a 3 to 4, it's like an additional strength, and then a 5 to 6, you do d6 mortal wounds to yourself. What the? Right, you're already playing Dread Mob a lot of the time, so you're already going to be taking hazardous checks. So GW's only understanding of quote unquote fun is for us to take more hazardous checks and blow ourselves up more. Right, so it's like it's not cool, and it may be my order and what I said those abilities is wrong, but nonetheless those are the abilities. And it in general, though it's cool that it gives us a diversity of random cool outcomes, that's very, very punishing of d6 mortal wounds to it. So not only do we not get abilities like characters that can attach to this unit, it's very limited to what detachments it actually wants to be a part of. But it's slow as dirt, it has gigantic bases, and it doesn't want to interact with terrain properly. It's just, it has the vehicle keyword, so it's usually detrimental and more vulnerable to more weapons like grav style weapons. So in general, Killicans are just in a rough position to where the whole world is against them, and GWs too, because their data sheet also does unreliable things like if you're playing against Tyranids and they do Shadow of the War, boom, you just automatically failing Battle Shock essentially. People are trying to make you fail Battle Shock, and then the Killicans again are also a unit that's super susceptible to that. And they're going to be there to take the actual shock test because they're so slow, and they're going to be taking damage on the way in. So Killicans need a relook. I don't think it's out of the question to consider them something like Centurions, where you give them a 2-up armor save maybe. Right, little dudes walking around, little Killican, right, little Dutch style. If you're gonna make them a little bit slow, maybe a 2-up armor save, a little bit more interesting in that way. If you're worried about what they do for re-rolling because it's too random on their, I like the randomness of that ability, but It could be something else that's not so silly, like reroll hit rolls of 1. I mean, does it all have to be detrimental to us? Plenty of other, or maybe it's like an aura ability. So it's like, well, I want to increase throttling potential, but maybe it's a aura ability, right? It's like, So again, I want to see units that can affect other orc units. With these datasheet changes, maybe they could introduce that. I want orcs to have synergy across the army, not just rely on the Waaagh. So then we move to mech guns, which I would like to see kind of fill the role that tank busters fulfill as an alternative, or Ludas fill, but actually play long firing angles. If somehow we can get this unit to be a little bit cheaper, a little bit more reliable, of doing its actual role of, possibly popping a transport or threatening a T10 kind of medium-sized vehicle, maybe even kind of increase its tractor cannon so you can threaten flying units and demons, and you can bring 1 or 2 on your list to act as little tech pieces for those specific matchups. It's like there are diverse abilities it can have, but its datasheet ability is silly as well. You're like, I'm going to reroll 1s to hit, but not against vehicles and monsters. It's like, that's what I wanted you to do. And GW took that away. Not to mention that it needs to give us the AP back. Its custom Mega Blaster that it had before had its AP reduced, so we can't even rely on that. We're really restricted. So like I said before, it needs to be rewritten, because the bubble chuck is also silly in itself. It makes you roll for each individual model possibly, and that's just not realistic for your playing it competitively with on the clock, or like keeping track of dice to your opponent. It's not fun. It takes away the immersion. GW really needs to kind of pull back on all the making you manage dice with orcs, because it just takes away some of the immersion. Like, I love my big things of dice, don't get me wrong, but just constantly kind of having to roll for stuff and results, and some of them are just damage to yourself, is like, okay, that's what's happening here. The opponent starts getting lost. It's not immersive. Then we move to Titanic Walker changes. I already spoke about a lot of them. Want through terrain. I want the Morkanaut to actually have some AP. I don't want every single Titanic unit to take every hazardous check on itself when Dreadmount specifically when it's shooting those weapons, or I want those small weapons to be more reliable and something like more DACA. So if it does get a second hand, a benefit to its wall alongside the sustain, that could make Titanic Wonkers more interesting. But then we have Buggies and Flyer, 2 units that no matter really how much you're bringing them down, GW seems to be trying to not have us play them unless they're just so cheap that they're just a stat line. So both of these units need some kind of outcomes. It's a fine margin of, I know you're scared of us docking you off the table, but it would be awesome if you allowed us to actually get into combat. So Buggies, I don't hate them. We're trying Cult of Speed, but as you can see, Cult of Speed's in a really bad position, and I don't want to rely on just running the same old 2 or 3 reliable damage units from the codex itself to actually have a functional Cult of Speed. So Buggies need to actually be able to hold their own in the game, and I don't think GW wants Flyers to work. Then we go to the Big Mac himself. I'm speaking of the Big Mac, the new model we got. So the Big Mac is the new model we got. Doesn't know what he wants to do, right? So he has a really cool niche datasheet ability of, I can move through enemy units. I get to reroll the advance. That's pretty awesome. I'm a mech. I could be attached to knobs. I want to do all these cool things. But guess what, guys? I reroll once to hit and shooting. You like that? Like, what are you doing, bro? You just messed. You're confused, bro? Like, what were you even doing out here? The guy who started to write the rules, like, slipped in a war boss rule in there with the re-rolling advance or something. Like, that could be a Oof Talk Blackhawk ability when he gets into the game. That's something that you would expect. Like, that's a pretty cool ability if you can get it on a fast-moving unit. But he's not fast-moving. He's still just a basic dude in movement as well. So it's like, wait, does that even apply to him in an interesting way? So you're like, well, then maybe he's meant to, shoot. Put DACA on the field. Well, yeah, he's re-rolling 1s, but one of the weapons, of course, is blowing himself up, because I can't have anything decent without blowing myself up. Like I said, that's all GW wants to do. And then 2, his other gun's 1 shot. So I'm going to re-roll 1s for my 1 shot. And my low AP addition to other guns, low AP. Again, it's just not a really good identity where he's at. Right now, he is okay at his point cost. And it's nice to have a different, choice for tank busters in that case. And he does have play. I'm not saying he's completely hopeless or worthless. I'm just saying when he was written, it just didn't seem well thought out. He just didn't have an identity of who he was really supporting and what way he really was. He's kind of like a mixed bag of right? That's like the best way to put it. So Big Mac needs to kind of pick up an identity and choose what he's going to do and who he's actually going to lead. perform some kind of role what I would like to see in speed, or if he's going to like allow. I really always try to get my breakers to work with him. My breakers giving him additional AP, but their lack of punches and his lack of allowing them to do stuff is just lame. Maybe the reroll one just work for both shooting and melee. I don't think that's too much. Maybe a little bit points increase on that for him. But if he's going to be the versatile, he should be versatile like to whatever you're putting him to, and both abilities should apply to them. So maybe if you're re-rolling that advance and shooting them, he allows that unit assault. Now, he could make him really strong, but then just make his points more. Because I just want him to actually have a role, whether it's a dynamic, cool ability that's unique to him that makes units do stuff outside of the wall, or if it's a aura synergistic ability, he just kind of completely needs to get relooked at, even if it's not this edition. I'm just calling it now and putting it on the table so that this reverberates through the wall and GW catches notice. Because in my opinion, he's just kind of confused. Then he moved to Maz. Maz just straight up needs changes. He will be spoken about alongside the Beast Boss and Squigosaur for the next slide we're going to go over. But nonetheless, Maz needs to look like he did an index. We'll just say that to start off. And then last but not least, we're going to just throw in the Werboy. And, the Werboy really is just hopeless. He just kind of he has no place or no position where he's at. He would have to get completely re-looked at on how he's going to apply, in my opinion, to the hunt. And like I was saying earlier, I would really like to see him bring some kind of aura ability or a unit selection ability, kind of bring some synergy to Ork units. Maybe he points to Squigs and Rigs and he gives them some kind of power or strength or reliability or durability, whatever it is. Ork players really want units to feel like they cohesively work together, not just a bunch of missiles that are looking for a wall and then getting picked up like little glass bullets. So Werboy can definitely do something interesting, but right now he just needs to completely be dismantled and brought back to life. Like I said, he needed a respawn. So then we move into, not my last slide, but this is where I'll give you a warning. Not that I'm going to yell or anything outrageous, and some things you're already aware of and you've heard, but this is where I sound like I'm just going to be annoyed, because now we're going to talk about Squig Hog boys and Squig mounted characters. Oof. What can I say that's not gray and lame about these guys, right? Some of it is just looking back on the past on what we were and what we could be, but that's kind of the problem here, because people still see this unit in the same light, and I think GW does it too. So let's just say right now, this is not the same unit as it was in Index Hammer, whether we were talking about the Squig mounted characters or the Squig Hog boys themselves. They are not the same thing as they were. And anyone that doesn't understand it at this point does not understand Orks. And that is GW is one of those people. I'm going to say it, because 150 points for this unit that is objectively bad in the current meta that they are supposed to be designed for, right? These are monster / vehicle hunters specific units, and in a meta that is a bunch of vehicles and monsters, whether they're baby knights, they're little blight haulers, demons, elite infantry, big knights, big demons, these guys don't do their job. They're not brought on almost virtually any list for that reliability on outcome. They cannot perform the task, and they are really bad when they whiff because they cost so dang much. So these units are objectively bad in a meta that they should be standing out in if GW even felt like 150 points was decent for them, but they're not. And that goes for my first point, is because GW sees them as they did in Index Hammer. And anyone else who thinks that they need to stay anywhere near 150 points also falls into that boat. So these guys are quote unquote monster vehicle hunters that can't do it. Now, other things that we're paying for, not only from the fact that we're not indexed. What I mean by we're not indexed is we don't have the +1 to hit from the actual Squig. Now that the Knob Squig is now, used to be a character. Shout out to guys who knew that. The Index Hammer, the actual Knob Squig used to be a character. Give them to a unit, get +1 to hit. Now you have the same unit that doesn't have +1 to hit in a far more potent meta with armies that have way more counters to their profiles. Yet these units also pay for a pivot. So now my Squig Hog boys lost movement because they paid for a pivot. So they lost +1 to hit. They lost a pivot. So their mounts, right? Keep in mind, they're mounted on 4. So if I'm going into something that's -1, okay, I'm hitting on 5s, and they're only strength 6 going to 7. So they're not wounding vehicles well. So not sure what those guys are doing, but hey, they're in there. Then you go, well, I have bomb squigs, but you have counterintuitive bomb squigs because one, if you were out of line of sight and I could kind of position my squigs to participate in screen clearing by throwing bomb squigs over a wall, in this case, if I advance out from my stage position where I finally didn't get shot, even though I'm probably getting shot everywhere because my huge unit size, I can't even use my bomb squig. So now we have counterintuitive bomb squigs. We have a pivot rule that we pay for. We don't have a -1 to hit that we're essentially still paying for in point costs. How did this unit only go down in 10 points? But not only that, we have to talk about how the Beast Boss on Squigosaur is trash. So Mazrog and the Beast Boss on Squigosaur went down in toughness and lost their wounds, right? So these guys lost a little bit of wound, a little bit of toughness, so they got softer. But they also can't fight their way out of a paper bag or out of a Tyranid belly, for example, right? So a Beast Boss on Squigosaur just existing with 1 AP is outrageous. He's only at 2 damage, and then even then, he's only strength 6, I believe, as himself on top. So he's this big old mounted dude, but the weak profile into elite infantry and a weak profile into anything that's a vehicle or monster. Not to mention, because now a bunch of our units have 3 anti-infantry 3+, and his attacks are only 3 damage. His only place he can kind of do damage is in War Horde with Ed Wappa's Kill Choppa. Other than that, he is a soft body and he doesn't do anything. His data sheet abilities of I can heroic and +1 to charge. Yeah, the +1 to charge got countered by the paying for the pivot. So I'm not even happy, excited with that. And then I'm going to heroic what? So I'm going to softly get punched back if it's outside of the wall and lose wounds outside of it. I can't really fall back and charge anyway. So if I'm stuck here, then I'm just simply stuck here. It's only certain detachments. So that one data sheet ability is still only decent in like the Hunt, for example, or maybe Tactical Brigade. So he's soft. He doesn't take enhancements well. He's not good on his own. Well, the only enhancement he takes well is Edwappa's Kill Choppa and maybe the Glory Hog. So he doesn't really do much then to hold a couple enhancements. Then he doesn't do damage on his own. He doesn't benefit the unit that he's a part of. He's a giant base that's alongside a bunch of other giant bases. So really he just increases the profile, so you're more likely to get shot. And then he can lose in precision matchups to just elite infantry fighting characters as well, even though he's supposedly this big mounted squig beast, and his beast himself is unreliable to vehicle and to monsters too, who also only has 2 AP. So what are we doing here? This is one of those units that would need a +1 to hit at the very minimum, and he's still keeping that +1 to charge rolls. Okay, I'm not letting you get away with that. If anything, you're also giving me a reroll charge or something. I don't know. So it's like, the Beast Boss on Squigosaur, just like the Squigs, these dudes just all need AP. It's just silly, and that's a big factor. But also, our whole codex of being damaged too, including these kind of characters, is so underwhelming and not impressive. Not to mention that we don't get to reroll anything. So could you include rerolling ones to wound or reroll ones to hit if you don't want to use +1 hit because you're scared our mounts are too good? There's other stuff that could be interesting to this unit. And then we move to Mazrog. Mazrog just needs to go back to Index Hammer in the case of, I argue directly straight up, he needs his 4-up Feel No Pain back. You have that silly or Necron character, the one that assets Battle Line. I'm having a brain fart now. You guys let me know in chat. Who has a 4-up Feel No Pain and has the aura ability to benefit Battle Line units, runs as an old lone op, so he can't be shot at certain times, and he's infantry, so he can move through terrain. And he has a 2-up armor save, and I believe he's like T8 or T9. That's so silly, and he's been that way since Index, and that's fine. Keep him. I'm not even saying get rid of that or nerf that guy to opinion, but I'm saying why did you so inconsistently focus down Maz so that he's less than a shadow of what he was, but then he could just look across the Great Green and he sees a little Necron infantry dude just mimicking his rules, just kind of pouncing in place like, haha, I also got a battle line buff. Like I said, we don't get an actual aura ability either. So his data sheet ability is, I can make you fight on death on a 4-up. Typically, people are going to shoot your pigs. They're so big, right? What are you doing? You gave him an ability to make people want to shoot you more. And then it's only on a 4-up, so he can't even reliably do it. You're going to fight with like one pig and maybe him at best. So his datasheet ability is completely underwhelming. Another unit, in my opinion, who liked that Necron character that I mentioned, could also benefit from maybe having the potential, if he dropped enough point costs and picked up an aura ability, to just run as an individual character. If you don't want to make him too tough because you can't have him a 4-up Feel No Pain, allow us to have a lone op that runs around like a missile, or that can at least benefit units with an aura ability. Not to mention his straight up melee potential. So he used to have the dev wounds on a 5+. So his mount and his actual killing datasheet ability that I'm still in favor of used to be more reliable in the case of, well, at least my mount can possibly get one of these hits off, and it's a dev wound to really help finish off this enemy problematic unit. But now it's only on a 6-up, so that's really, you're just wishing on a dream. We only get 6s and we only get hazards. It seems like as Ork players, we get 6s and we get hazards. That's all you want to give us, GW? Come on now. So Maz, in a very creative way, could just become of, well, if you don't want to lead characters, maybe he can be a leader by his just presence, since he's an epic character. But he needs a glow up. So if you don't want to revert to a 4-up Feel No Pain, Maz just needs to find a way. So you're paying for the bomb squigs on these pigs. You're supposedly anti-fighting vehicles and monsters, but none of those profiles match it. You're constantly getting shot, but you have just about no defensive abilities from getting shot. All they can do is increase your unit size. So, hey, thanks GW, I can make a 400-point unit if I put a character and these pigs there. And then, hey, it only allows 400 points of the enemy unit to shoot me on turn 1. Oops, better hope I go first. Is that a proper design? Now, you could argue that the Squig Hog Boys themselves could, if you play for a big brick, take a huge decrease, right? But then you're just, again, paying for stats. So there is something in between of their points need to come down, but they also need the reliability of combat. So whether you're changing their data sheet to when they charge, they get an additional AP, or if they fight vehicles and monsters, give them additional AP. Maybe that's something the Squig boss, the Beast Boss and Squigosaur could give them, so that they could become more reliable. But again, the problem we're having here is also just making enough reliable contact from the unit what it used to be when it was even diminished from all the shooting, from being able to be +1 to hit, gave it the ability to kind of continue momentum and have steam. So I'm still in favor of it. Needs like a +1 to hit. So whether it's Maz that's giving them something, or the additional AP, or the Squig House and Sigasaur giving them +1 to hit, whatever it gets, these guys need something that's not only fun and interesting to the Ork player, but it also needs to increase the reliability of this unit and counter its really, really obvious weaknesses of Squig Hog Boys, which is we're only durable on the Waaagh. So like when we have a 5-up on a 5-up, sure, then people have to dig us out with shooting. That's fine. I understand that. So I'm still love our Feel No Pain. But outside of that, for when you're paying for a giant brick, that thing's just getting shot up. And if you're paying for a small unit and it doesn't have a leader, you can't even kill a baby knight without dropping like 3 CP sometimes. You're averaging about 9 damage, 8 damage. It was about 8 damage. If it's an Imperial, like 9. If it's a Chaos, like 10 for the baby knights. For a 4-man unit of Squig Hog Boys without, a character leading it, and you used to drop a bunch of CP to actually reliably kill it. Not to mention, like I said, can't use your bomb squigs. So all in all 3 of these units just clearly aren't understood by GW, and still, are looking like they're being perceived as an index hammer unit. And honestly, this is one of the units that I think should just really get focused on big time as Orks. And I think Ork players should make it be known, because even though I am always positive and I say how these guys can be played, and I understand that people still get them to work, all in all, we're getting ripped off. And these guys only find a way because we make them find a way. So Squig Hog Boys need some love. And that's all I got to say for this rant currently. All right. So with that being said, let's move on to GW doesn't understand Orks. And that's in question mark, because I'll leave it to the community in chat, because of course I'm still going to read chat after this. It's going to be a long one, boys. Does GW understand Orks is the question here. Now, this isn't to cause hate, talk down on GW necessarily. This is a true question. When we look at some of the points we've already covered in this video, when we speak of the versatility of confusion in the Big Mech, the bomb squig nerfs being taken off at the knees, detachments that were literally the best becoming the worst or least played once GW touched them. So Bully Boys, Green Tide, for example, and more DACA. Once GW did its balance, quote unquote, you absolutely balanced nothing. You dropped a nuke on these detachments, and then the reverberations were so bad and so concussive because you don't know what you're doing with orcs that you affected other detachments like Green Tide and Dread Mob, and then inevitably you were still able to mess with Warhorde just based off the fact that you balanced other armies and you were balancing us, but then you left a bunch of predators like Knights and Death Guard just kind of roam the meta and cause a muck. So it was very inconsistent. It was not well thought out. You hit us with double nerfs. So you have to be brought under this question and scrutiny because we are under unique circumstances as an orc faction and army. So I do give GW credence that at least we have a lot of detachments. So I could understand if you messed up even half of them, but you messed up all of them to a certain degree. You really did. Now, I would say that Tactical Brigade can still be played, and so did Warhorde, like I said earlier in the video, but you actually made them less fun. You made them less fun. You made them less diverse, and lists started to look the same, and results started to plummet. And it was all by your hands. And we're in this unique case because we have so many detachments and a unique book, a deep book, excuse me. So we have a unique codex as a faction, and we have a unique detachment variety right alongside Marines. But we're not the poster child. So when we get all of this versatility and reliability, instead of being looked through and actually tweaked, GW just smacked us down to get out of the way and said, be happy with the new models we're giving you. So is it too soon for GW to admit it's wrong? Because like I said, they gave us a lot of new models. I won't say GW hates us because they don't. If you're new to orcs, you don't give up on orcs simply because you think GW hates us. That's definitely not the case. They give us great books and lore, a bunch of new model lines, bunch of detachments. We're probably going to be the big bags next edition. So like I said, I'm not even talking big bad about GW in that way of like they hate orcs. I think they just don't know how to write our rules and don't take the time to try to learn it. Now, again, GW seems to think simple is best. They think that just because we're orc players and the Waaagh in their head is a simple army rule, right? They think that simply calling the Waaagh is light up all my stuff, right? If you watch GW, the actual app, TV, right? If you ever watch their bat reps, they look like, they look like I did when I was playing on my rug when I first started 8th edition at home with cardboard boxes and tissue paper. I would just line up on my dudes and call Waaagh. That's how they understand orcs. So when you look at our rules, they're like +1 to hit on Waaagh, +1 to shoot on Waaagh. Your unit gets a feel no pain on Waaagh. Like everything. Why would you make all of our rules only reliant on the Waaagh? Because you think it has to be simple. You think that we have to be simple and linear in that way. But then also, in a GW's opinion, hazardous is the only style of fun. So you're either giving us hazardous or more hazardous, right? It's like, here's a gun, but hazardous. And here's an ability, but hazardous. But on a bunch of different armies, whether it's from an aura or from an army rule or from characters nearby or what included, or they can have access to all of those same abilities and not be taking endless mortal wounds. But it's like, it's okay, I'll take mortals, but making them redundant and everywhere throughout our army, even on our data sheets, is boring. It's boring in the way of, it used to be fun when we were hazardous to the opponent too, right? Make us hazardous to where, sure, I'll blow up, but you blow up too, right? If I'm running 3 custom Mega Blasters and I blow up horribly, okay, I want more reliable that my actual Death Dread blows up too. What's up? You take some damage with me too. See, in that case, orcs like the hazardous and the randomness and the damage and the chaos. But if it's just you, then it just feels bad. So why is GW only looking at, hey, you used to take hazardous checks. That's fun, right? You can roll a lot of dice and then take more hazardous checks. It's like, all right, guys, I get it. It's fun. But, we also want to have some reliable outcomes so we can win games, so we can have tactics and strategies and contingency plans. So it can't just simply be simple and hazardous, right? But on top of that, where's our horde? Where's our cheap list? I already showed you how Green Tide has virtually no players. And It's like GW doesn't even look at us as a horde army anymore. If you look at other horde detachments and builds, it's like, I'm not even hating on them, but they have strats that regen entire units. That's what we used to have in 8th edition. And so GW took away that horde identity. We can regen just models. And then you wonder why the detachment can't function without me asking for a 5-up invuln at all times or a decreased cost on units. It's not that I'm, thirsty to just win and mob you with just boy bodies. There's no diversity within that boy body, but you're also not making it playable. And we're just punching bags for the opponents and picking up models. So we're of our cheap list, right? If we're going to play, which I actually think why people are kind of drawn to Cult of Speed is a style of cheap trading, always having waves of stuff army like Cult of Speed can do, where it's like, okay, my buggies are so cheap that I can throw them forward, they die, and I kind of have this rinse and repeat capability. Well, that's how we used to like to play Warhorde, and other detachments might want to play like that too, but we don't even have that option anymore. It's like we have to bring characters, and then if it's not just the characters, then we're just relying on the Waaagh. Where's the synergy and strategy and diversity in that? No aura abilities, no stacking potentials other than the kill rate giving +1 strength. There, you can't find that anywhere throughout the army. That's interesting. Of course, there's Gaz. I'm a big proponent of Gaz, critical 5+ ability, unbridled carnage to snag a boys in a 20-man unit. I know that, but we've had this in Zindax Hammer, right? And the fact that we still know it, we still love it, it's kind of showing my point, right? And if you disagree with me, let me know in the chat, because there's a bunch of people here and we're all talking. And of course, you're going to be in the comments after. Am I out of my mind here? I don't think so. And like I said, I'd hardly ever complain, and I'm not trying to put GW down, but it's come to the time where I'm coming into question, do you know what you're doing with Orks? Because should Ork units only impact the game during the Waaagh, right? A lot of the time people are like, well, after my Waaagh, my army's just straight up picked up. And before that, I'm pretty much just hiding until I can get picked up. Well, at least different detachments might not want to play that way. Yeah. Like Tactical Brigade, for example. That's what's another interesting part of Cult of Speed or Dread Mob is sometimes they can work a little bit outside of the Waaagh. But then, like we said, their units, like we were talking about Morkanauts and Gorkanauts, their datasheet abilities based off the Waaagh. Like, what? I have a mech. And I know that sometimes it can stack. I covered that in my video on how it can stack in like a proficient way if you're bracketed, but they didn't even make it in like +1 weapon skill, +1 ballistic skill on the Waaagh. You just gave +1 to hit. You couldn't even be that thoughtful. So again, you brought into question, do you understand Orks? So that's just my opinion. It's not to be fully too negative, but I've mentioned a lot of the time. So here's my breakdown of it. I've finally come to the realization that I have to call into question, does GW understand Orks? I know the Ork community doesn't understand Orks. I know that for a fact, for a multitude of reasons, but I'm not going to try to bag on the community because I don't understand other factions too. So that's fine. But GW is the one who did this. And when the other community banned us, it was because we were the only faction that was bullying, and they were worried because it was just Orc shooting them, and that feels bad. That happened in past editions. So they were suffering from PTSD, I'll say. But that's still not an excuse for them not handling the community itself, not handling the other super strong factions that were happening as well. So but that being said, that's why I'm focused on James' workshop and understanding us, not does the community understand us, even though that's also something that I would agree with that they don't. But that's okay, because not everyone's meant to. But GW, James Workshop, when they're balancing, quote unquote, there should be some balance in there, not just straight nuclear impact of biased nature. It's just silly. All right, so then we move on to my final thoughts, because this has been a long one, and I'm still going to read chats. So we're going to cap it at around 2 hours. But for my final thoughts is hope for the best and prepare for the worst, right? So I'm of good nature, positive energy, full of energy because you gets, and you should be too. But I'm also prepared for GW just being silly and being like, -10 to Squig Hog boys. You like that, huh? Like they're going to do it again. They just don't know how else to act. It's what I've come to expect from them. But I'm prepared. That's why I moved into playing Cult of Speed or really been hobbying a lot or whatever it may be. I'm getting more involved in the community, talking to people. There's stuff you can still play or still win games. That's never in question. So still be positive. GW has in the past improved poor performing factions. So it's not even out of the question that they've identified the problem or that they've done, and they might even just simply revert stuff, hoping that fixes things. Because as we can see, they're not critical thinkers necessarily when they're examining Ork codexes, or books or rules. So in that case, they might just straight up go to a revert, which, like we said, we've seen because, for example, custodes were reverted, right? Something else that can use reverts is Sisters of Battle, but something that could be performing and do well is like Tyranids or Adept. Well, not real well, they still suck, but Death Guard before they got a buff, or before they got the book, excuse me, or Imperial Knights. So armies can come up. That's why I say still hope for the best. They have reverted rules. All in all, Orks can still win, but we do lack an identity. And honestly, that's been one of my problems is where's the Orky nature, right? The Orky nature is the fun chaos, but I'm still very intimidating. I'm still coming in with an actual game plan of how I'm going to rip your head off, how I'm going to crump you, how I'm going to land this axe on you. And because I'm an Ork, it doesn't mean I only play Goths. It doesn't mean that's my only identity. I have Death Treads, I have Buggies, I have Daka, right? Our nature is chaos in all of those styles of gameplay, and still being able to perform in that chaos a concise, well thought out, possible game plan with contingency plans. And currently, we don't have that. It's just simply chaos and feel bad moments in multiple detachments, in multiple units, in multiple combos. No synergy across units and the detachments themselves with auras or characters picking units that are outside of them, outside of tactical brigade. There's just none of the stuff that makes 40k fun to other people, which is like multitude of options for certain units within the army, exist. And I understand that Orks were meant to just get picked up and cleaned off. But in that, the being picked off and cleaned off, not once in this video have I said we should become so durable or so killy that we should be the best at any one thing. I think our nature of being expendable should be consistent, but we should be expendable and slowly ripping you apart as that's happening. But we're also doing it outside of the wall. So our nature is to be aggressive and combative at all times, not simply one turn of the game. So with that being said, there is some Warhorde fatigue. So even though we love Warhorde and the other detachments are suffering for so bad, if you're just simply playing Orks and you don't play that often and none of this stuff of meta shifting and stuff applies to you and you're just enjoying the chat, keep playing Warhorde. And if you're new into the edition and you're getting ready for the next one, keep playing Warhorde. Warhorde's the base of Orks a lot of the time. So it'll help you with the fundamentals and the basics. When Orks are down, it's best to work on the basics and the foundations of your ability to play. So for my final thoughts, Orks still have a lot ways to go. GW can definitely help us out as well. But with that being said, let's move on to the live chat. So now we're at the live chat part of this video. Thank you. I'm done with my presentation, ranting, arguing, everything I got to say. Let's get through what these gits are saying because we have a lot of walls in the chat. As you can see, the weird boy getting stuck in there. We have the super chats here. Shout out to Jank. So we have my boy Ecop with 5 Waaagh Tactic memberships. Whoa, to my get. This has been around since the beginning, since year one. Absolutely love this guy. Wish you could chat more often. We thank you very much for the support. And always love your little profile picture and all the support you give to the community. So thank you very much. If you get a membership from this get, be sure to give him a war boss in chat for that because he's been doing it for hundreds of you guys at this point. Then we got Rick B, another supporter. Very generous of you. It means a lot. Thank you very much, Rick B, for this. Of course, whoa, for those members, if you got a membership, we do have videos in there. We're going to be adding more content to that as well. We're evolving. We're only on year 2, guys. Remember, for all these other channels you've seen, been around for a hot minute. Kudos to them. We're only 2 years in. So with your support, your advice, your comments, your talks, we can go far. So thank you to gets like Rick B. And of course, check out our memberships because we have more videos coming, and let me know what you think of the after action. If it's bad, how it can be improved. Then we go to Murder Mouth. 5 Waaagh Tactic memberships. Whoa, the Murder Mouth. Like always, this get himself is one of the true Orks that we have in the community, as he got his teeth knocked out constantly running into the deep end of the boy mob pits, and he ended up finding his way, collecting his teeth, and becoming a proper boss himself. So thank you, shout out to that, and always supporting the chat and being there for all the new players. Shout out to my boy McFatson. Haven't seen you in a while, buddy, but very nice to see you. Judavia, give us looted tanks, and my life is yours. You always bring that up. Thank you, buddy. And I'm glad you said that, because that's not a part of this, but that's definitely going to be a conversation going into next edition, is where are our tanks? Where's our DACA, the specific vehicles? All right. And not everything has to be a transport that does DACA. Well, thank you very much for that super chat. I'm definitely in favor of that. Just like with Dr. Jazz. Thank you for the $5 super chat. He said, just started Orks. Fell in love with Green Tide. Dude, me too, man. That's what I'm talking about. What unit should I grab for my first 1,000 point games? No epic heroes. I play local group, plays narrative lead. So we actually have a lot of content on the Green Tide, even in memberships. But all in all, Green Tide's pretty linear. Mobs of boys. There is versatility. Now, I'm actually going to do a 1,000 point video. I've been setting up to play 1,000 point games because, you know, if you play competitive, you don't play too much 1,000 point games. But I'm intentionally going to, for this video topic in itself, more alongside 500 point games. But though the map is the same size, and that's a benefit. Keep in mind, all of the objectives have been moved closer since the changes that happened for this season, right? So the objective markers actually move closer for 1,000 point games than they used to be. So the speed and the mobility isn't as necessary, which is good for you and your mobs of boys. So something I would consider is you're going to be foot slogging it. If you want mobility, would be weird boys. Pain boys go a long way, and you want at least one war boss. Now, if you're going to bring support units, one truck with maybe a SWAT team, whether it's a flash can and a tank buster could help, or it could be 2 tank busters in one truck for the actual threat of having some sort of DACA as your boys move up the field. So most of it's going to be boys. Of course, you probably want one grot unit for your home field, the screen the backfield, and of course some CP for you. I know you can sticky it, but you don't want guys to get behind you, right? So good luck in that. And thank you for that, because like I said, we are doing that 1,000 point video coming up here soon. So I can help you out with that. And let's see what else. I think that's what we got right now for the super chats. So let me see what else. Oh, we got Murder Mouth again with 5 wall tactic gifted memberships again. Whoa, for the Murder Mouth, the big boss himself. Very generous of you, and it means a lot. Thank you very much. Hopefully I did you guys justice, to those who supported. It means a lot, and helped all the other guys in the communities and gets. Because you guys gave so many members out, I'll be reading some of these member chats. So if you're highlighted as a member and you're still here, start chatting it up, because I'm going to be reading member chats specifically right now. I'd love to read all your chats. If you say something very keen and now, I'm going to read it too. But because it'd be a lot of chats to get through, I'm going to be mostly with the members chats for now. But of course, all you guys got something to say. I'm proper, I bet. But shout out to my boy Jank. Love this get. Channel moderator, means a lot. Thank you for being around and always helping us out. He said, I got finally back into the swing of things last 6 weeks. What's up, you get? What are the good conversations here? They nerfed more DACA, and DG is stomping for months. I think they felt like the big predator factions would kind of predate on each other and balance, and one would come out on top, but then it just came out to both of them beat each other up, and Death Guard still slightly does edge them, but yeah, it definitely in a feel bad season right now. The Weird Boy says, shout out to the Cult of Seed players here. True Orks through and through. Yes, they are, right? When I covered the undefeated Ork list, that guy went 4 months, and me and him were messaging during that time period. Shout out to Russell Graham. And he was like, dude, I lost a bunch of games. I'm on a losing streak. Then he was like, look, I finally won my first game. Then he was like, went to an RTT, and he's like, I finally won 2 games. So he built it up. And like you said, proper players. It's wild as an Ork who has lost his preferred detachments because you were a fully bully boy to get. Now, mind you, I think bully boys can still be played in 3s, but then you're just so restricted that it's like you have 1.5 builds, right? And so it's like you got that taken away, but now you're playing Green Tide. And as you see, it's at its all time, but hey, you're trying to counter the meta you get. So I love it. And maybe this whole time you were truly a Tide player. So shout out to Murder Mouth. Like Scott Bear said, shout out to Murder Mouth for the meta shit and the membership. You a legend. You're a legend too for shouting them out. More DACA is your detachment. That's funny because almost nobody's playing more DACA. Right? And I showed that was from stat check, from what those stats came from. I'm surprised there's not 100% agreement on GW not getting Orks. I'm not sure what that means. Cult of Speed needs more AP. Yeah. They envy them boys, them green boys. They always do. Low key, I think that everybody does. I think they envy us because, like I said, in the far future where there's only war, we're the kids having fun. So we're having fun, and ultimately we're winning every battle, we're winning every exchange, we're winning every timeline, we're winning every story. Ultimately, we're happy at the end of pretty much every story and every engagement. But then we're also happy on a tabletop. How can you say we're not winning? Are we not the main characters? It's almost like this is our universe. If Orks could make a universe, they'd make the 40K universe. You know, if they, you know, if the Imperium could make a universe, it would look like essentially like the Helldivers game, where it's just one big super city that just controls the whole galaxy and beats everybody else up for fun, right? It's like if everybody else has like different versions of what 40K would look like, Orks are winning because this is our universe. This is how we wanted it to be. So by our will, this is why the universe is constantly in chaos, not because the chaos gods, because Gork and Mork, they're way more powerful. Let's see what else is there. Any of those quarterly updates? No, I don't know anything about those yet. I agree in having the same abilities for our knife silver time unit seems fair. Absolutely does. Tyranid monsters can move through terrain buildings and such. They have the ability on themselves. No reason why we shouldn't be able to get that as well. And on our Gargantuan Squig-Oth. Going to throw tons of snaggers and 2 war trikes into buggies ahead of the Gnaw. Let's go. Oh, you meant Squigs. He said Squigs. My bad. Don't buy a pain boss. Well, in the future, pain boss might have his place, right? Pain boss might have his place. Let's see what else chat has to say. Arcane's promoting my rant. Thank you, buddy. Whoa, Arcane knew I was going to do a chant. Me and him were talking about them. Mega boss badly needs to drop some points. Yeah, I can say him coming down in points too, but I'm more focused on the Mega Noms and Gaz and Big Mac specifically that can come out, and then also diversity. But if it was only points, you can honestly include him in there to come down in points also. But then again, we get to that same 50-50 where you're like, why would I bring a Big Mac? But I understand what you're saying, because normally he's like 2 AP, 2 damage. He really doesn't do anything else. He's just thick, but he is quite thick. Boss, smoke my name. Yes, I did. The Gork and Mork were calling you, you get. Comparatively, pretty much all of our stuff is underwhelming. To a degree, it is. Mostly because we don't have like a cool kind of way to synergize our army and rules and overlap them in a like expressive way. Can you take a war boss with Breaker Boys? Yeah, absolutely, and you should. A lot of well, it depends. If you're going into a meta where you have to focus hard that down one unit really bad, like a Greater Demon or Big Knights, then yeah. If you're playing like a bunch of chaff horde, like horde style, where it's a bunch of little stuff, or you just need a little bit of support from melee because you're mostly DACA, a Breaker Boy unit might work on its own. And like people said, there is a style in the Big Mac. Shout out to the Wicked Joe. Whoa, the Wicked Joe, always one of the biggest and best bosses we got around. Love that get. Ludas need to go back down to what they used to be, right? And then mech guns should be paired in the cost. Like, right, I want to own a mech gun, put it around, put some batteries in it. Squighawk points don't do enough points. No, James Work. What do you call about Art of War for? Art of War makes. Oh, okay. All right. Some of the chat was talking about. So I'll bring it up. Fine. Hopefully, Art of War doesn't think I want smoke because I love them gets. But Art of War is a channel because someone was asking actually right here. Foy Flynn. He's like, Art of War is a channel. It is a channel, and they are not too favorable to orcs. Of course, Michael Mann, who has been on the channel, is an orc lover, is a great orc player. He's been on the channel, so he's very familiar. So hopefully he brings some life and love to them from the orcs or for the orcs. So that'd be pretty nice. But for what we know, it just seems like GW and the community itself followed Art of War's lead in kind of the whole burning the orcs at the stake thing. So and they'll say it themselves. They're not, at least like Lennon, I think, will say himself, like he's not a big orc fan. I think Siegs doesn't like necessarily respect them too much. Maybe he doesn't, or one of them doesn't. I don't know who exactly, but nonetheless, I know Jack does. Shout out to Jack, and I know Man does. So the channel doesn't hate orcs. It's just as a group collectively, they didn't like them what they were and did give them a lot of backlash, and that did seem to directly reflect on where the position we're at now. Because some of the stuff they called for was them, but some of it wasn't, right? Like boys also going up in cost and Ludas had nothing to do with Art of War. So you can't simplify it to that, but a lot of people do have that sentiment. And Burner Boys could use access to a leader. Yeah, maybe like a Big Mac, like I said. And if they did something more interesting, if you could if they could be access to a leader, might be more interesting. I think they don't can't be a Big Mac, but they could have a leader. I think right now it's just a pain boy right now. You think extra attack should take extra strength from the Waaagh? Maybe, but I don't know. That'd just be fun, Rick B. Honestly, if you got like extra attacks from your mounted and such. That's funny. So let's see what else going on in chat. I'm almost catching up. Killican's new ability. If they all target the same big unit, they get an additional AP. Okay, maybe if they're a big unit, they used to be if they were a big unit, they get an additional attack, right? And I would like if they somehow would like a little bit better in melee, because I just bias like melee, I guess. Let's see what else is going on here. GW, hey, blowing yourself is very orky. Bonus to us is that your army sucks. Stupid. That was so harsh. That was so harsh. Let's see what else is going on here. To a chat. Squigs are best for just screening. They are so booty. That's funny. Cunning and Brutal University. Shout out to that kid. And he said, Sir Chubbs a lot. If you want them to be tanky mounted unit, then make them tanky. Yeah, right. They would really need an invuln at all time to be considered somewhat tanky at all. Because so much stuff has AP, to be honest. But I'm not even necessarily asking for that. I'm just saying they have to have some kind of identity, right? They have to have something they do, especially if you're going to make them a huge unit and then they just stand and like pay for pivot and be slow and have to stage and not kill anything well. It's like, what are they actually doing? Can you give them some kind of identity, like purpose here? Because they have no purpose right now. Yeah, the Beast Ball used to have a reroll aura. Good call about that, right? It's not a members chat, but he did say Beast Ball used to have the aura reroll charges for Beast Snaggers only. Yeah. They need to bring something like that back. I don't know if it needs to be restrictive again, but they need something. I like that he leads a unit, but also has an aura. That's something that we need to bring back to Orks. Have an aura, but also still be leading a unit. Let's see what's going on. Will you pay War Horde spam truck and you will like it, right? You will play Sir Chubbs a lot. You will play War Horde truck spam and you will like it. Right? Just play Index Hammer. I'm like, no, I won't. I'll keep losing games. Never. Yeah, when Odex came out, right, I was super excited too, dude. When Odex came out, I was like, yeah. And then, right, guys, not the 2 mile and horn, but for those who are still here watching, and I rant, remember when Grotmas happened, and I said, oof, the game's pretty balanced right now, guys, and I don't know if we need more detachments because game's about to be whack once we do that. And GW gave us another one, and I knew from there on we were going to be in a bad downhill place for the game state as a whole, and it was true. It was true. What else was going on here? Shout out to Morty and Glory, right? Because that guy is always on point too. And I don't know if he's still live, but he was live. Probably not, because in UK it's probably like 5 a.m. or something. We have to be brutal but cunning. Absolutely, right? And our rules should reflect that we can be brutal and cunning. That's what I'm saying. We need aura abilities. We need abilities. We pick units. We need synergies. We need, if I'm near other Ork units, I get something. If I'm fighting you and you're by yourself and I'm near other Ork units, I get something. There's so many ways Orks should be way more interesting. If we keep grinding and getting reps, create your own unique list, the Orks momentum gets better. And we'll be able to stretch our legs into other detachments. Yeah, exactly. Monday said, I want buggies to be good in all. It would be fun to run those models, right? They're just so not reliable into anything. They're just reliable into like they're big and they're kind of fast. I do like that they like fall back and charge and do all types of stuff. I've been playing more with Cult of Speed because like I explained, I play every detachment. So I'll play it for like a month or a couple months, whatever it is, some more than others. Sometimes I'll jump between. But yeah, I actually play every single detachment. So all the stuff I've talked about and that hurts, I felt myself too. So yeah, definitely like buggies to be able to play for sure. I have just realized more DACA on smaller games do shine a lot. Yeah, the detachment itself isn't like the stratagems and the inclusivity of the detachment are pretty awesome. Luda's flashes and take buses do make these maps work. Of course, some rolling 35 to 40 dice is nice as well. Yeah, for sure. I think it totally has playability, but it does struggle to ever get 4-1, struggles to even be on a winning percentage as we've seen. But I'm in agreement with you, and the small points is a good call out there because The Waaagh would be more influential. The strats would be more influential because you're focusing down units for moving cover and additional AP. The mobility would be beneficial for small games. So that's a good call out. Great job. Why is the Pain Boss bad? Isn't he cheaper than a Pain Boy? Because he's exclusive to the Snaggle Boys who already have a Feel No Pain. So, and he's way worse in combat than the Beast Boss, and his benefit giving to the Snaggle Boys, which typically goes in tandem as a combo, which it's intentionally using the Snaggas to allow yourself to reroll for the boss, so the boss can fish for more hits. So the Pain Boss is just straight up like, well, you get a 5 Feel No Pain. That's all you get. So he would have to be quite substantially cheaper. That way you can pay for enhancement maybe, or him just being cheap on his own. So he's just bad. How he's currently ran and like how he rolls. Yeah, Burner Boys need to just go up in AP. They need to be better. What's up, Blake? You said you should be able to sequence things to be more effective. Yeah, you should. That would also be great, like Sisters do. He says that's what Sisters do, but they have better shooting. Yeah, exactly. There's ways to make us better as a cohesive force, right? Because that's what people forget. When I talk about our Orks identity and Ork nature, I was going to bring up lore, but I was kind of already feeling like the video was long, but who cares? I'm still here. That it's like our Waaagh energy and who we are should come from that we're close to other Orks when we're trying to actually impose our will on somebody, which is what getting stuck in and fighting is, imposing our will. So really, when we're around other Ork units, or if you're not near your own friendly units, that'd be very beneficial for Orks to get some kind of benefit from mobbing up, ganging up on you, having more confidence, having morale. There's a bunch of different benefits we could get that would require the Ork player to be like, all right, outside of the Waaagh, maybe I'm outside of the Waaagh. Don't get my additional tags, don't get my invuln, don't get none of that stuff. But some of my other units can play a more cat and mouse game now because of our other abilities. So it's just like, it's just not good. So yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So Blake, you got the right idea. I get. Shout out to Blake, like always. I'm gonna say the real thing. Make more bikers battle line for speed freaks. Honestly, I think I like speed freaks without so many without bikers as much. But if you were to make them, that could make them a little bit more appealing. But currently where I'm at, like for maybe smaller games and such, but currently where I'm at, I don't think I even want that many bikers in my speed freaks list. And that's just because the meta is so tuned to killing 3 wound stuff. Tried the pain boss 3 times, worthless. I tried the pain boss 1 time. Like when I was running the hunt, I was running the pain boss a little bit. When I played him just 1 game really, with 20 dudes. And that didn't feel horrible. It really didn't, because I had multiple 20 dude units. What felt horrible was the detachment itself, kind of, because I'm like, all right, I can't do anything else with this guys, and if I run out of CP, I can't do the thing. But with a 20-man unit, I could like fall back and charge, and since he had the Feel No Pain, and there's a Zod unit, there's a pig unit, 20-man unit. Like I had these big bricks of things, and I was like, well, if you hurt one thing, then this other thing can fall back. You can't focus them down enough. That's where the pain boss could actually work, but he's mostly just bad and he needs to come down on points. I'm just saying that's the only advocation I can give for him. So with that being said, I made it to the 2-hour mark. So all you get got some to look at and hold on to while we talk about what's been going. When you look forward to the changes that's been happening for the Orks, when you look at what GW kind of put us in this weird position, does GW understand Orks? Do you agree with my final thoughts? Did I go too hard on the squigs? Is that the right way to feel about the pigs? Was I a little too generous or pulled back on the points? Or could I have been asking for more? Did I just overreact on how weak we are? Is the data sheet changes that I pointed out even make sense? Could you make better suggestions? All this are things I want to see in the comments. This video is going to be very impactful and could be important to see in the community. So make sure you guys got something to say and get stuck in, lads, because there's always one thing to keep in mind is don't cross our wall, because we'll not get eval. Whoa.